I remember sharpening nails, and so I ran. Dogs, from the dogs barking to finding my mom. And once I found my mom, I did panic. Like really bad.
What would drive a teenage boy to brutally murder his own mother with an axe while she slept? That was the shocking question many people asked after 17-year-old Carlos Hallowell made a frantic 911 call reporting that he had just found his mother, Denise Hallowell, unresponsive.
I didn't know what to do. I just shook her. Wasn't responsive except just breathing.
Paramedics and officers arrived shortly to find what they described as being the most horrific scene they have ever seen. They found Denise in bed, face down and lifeless, with the weapon buried 3 feet into her skull. Now, let's explore the details of this case and find out why Carlos would do such a thing like this to his own mother. Denise Hallowell had adopted Carlos as a 4-year-old boy from Guatemala because she too had been adopted when she was a little girl, so she wanted to extend the same care and affection she got from her adopted parents. On July 13th, 2019, the day of her murder, Denise and Carlos had just had lunch after they returned from the funeral of a family friend. Then, 3 hours later, Carlos would make the frantic 911 call, reporting the horrific crimes that had just taken place in their home.
911, what is the address of the emergency? 4419 Southwest Point. I need someone here immediately right now. Okay, tell me exactly what's happening. Okay. Oh my God. Okay.
The emergency services arrived soon, and they tried to revive Denise by performing CPR on her as she lay on her side. They couldn't turn her face up because of the angle of the axe. Despite their efforts, Denise remained unresponsive and was pronounced dead around 6:50 p.m. The entire community of Citrus County was in shock as the news of this horrific incident got to them, and they all asked one question: who would want to harm Denise? Well, nobody had an answer to that question, at least not at that moment. But considering that Denise and her son Carlos lived alone in their secluded lake house, and that Carlos was the last person to see her alive, it was only normal that he be brought in for questioning. Carlos told the detectives that he and his mother Denise had gone to sleep as soon as they finished having their lunch that afternoon.
Things on YouTube and fell asleep and got up again and texted people and fell back to sleep.
But then he was woken up from sleep by the barking of a dog around his window.
You remember at any time what time you went to bed or took a nap?
No. The only thing I remember was waking up to the dog barking next to my room, which was wrong.
Carlos found the dog barking strange because, according to him, their dogs were supposed to be on the other side of the little fencing area, and the barking couldn't have possibly come from them.
So went to go find the dogs, checked around the property looking for them. I couldn't find them, so I went to go wake my mom up to help me find them.
He then walked into his mother's room to ask if she had seen the dogs, and it was then that he discovered the horrific scene.
So what did you see when you walked in your mom's room?
It was our axe in the side of my mom's room, and I could still hear her trying to breathe.
The detectives are trying to get the facts and sequence of the events leading up to the point when Carlos found the lifeless body of his mother in her room. However, they're also trying not to punish him too hard, lest they cause him more trauma.
My mom and I we've been through a lot together, so, I mean, there's nothing I wouldn't do for her or anything. So, I just don't know what happened.
We know that a lot of people grieve differently, and people should not be judged by the way they grieve, but isn't it remarkably strange how composed, calm, and emotionally flat Carlos is in this interrogation room? I mean, for someone who had just seen the woman who raised him, right from when he was a toddler, murdered in such a gruesome manner.
I didn't know what to do. I just shook her. Wasn't responsive except just breathing.
Now, the detectives know that Carlos was definitely lying, because considering the severity of Denise's injury, it doesn't make any medical sense that she would still be breathing at the time Carlos found her. They suspect that she must have succumbed to her injuries before Carlos walked into her room, but why would Carlos lie about that? To make sense of this, the detectives pressed further to find the missing parts of the puzzle.
Saying that I went to my room, closed my door, and I hear my mom doing what she normally does, goes to her room, and then she needs something water. She usually gets water. Came out, got water. She went back to her room, never heard it up again.
Carlos has changed his story. Remember that he had earlier said that from the moment he went to sleep, he never heard or saw anything else apart from the barking of the dog. But now he said that he heard his mom get up to get some water.
So you don't know if she left to go anywhere else or something?
I don't. I usually don't know. I'm a heavy sleeper and I sleep on that side of the house. Her car is where the garage is, so I usually can't hear it, nor do I know. I usually have something playing in the background.
At this point, the investigators knew that Carlos was definitely hiding something because the inconsistencies in his story were so glaring. Usually when a person is lying, they'll find it difficult to keep their story straight because what they're narrating never happened, especially when they've not had the time to craft their story before narrating it. The first session of this interrogation lasted for about 50 minutes before the detectives took a break and returned 20 minutes later with some new information on the case. They had just learned that Carlos had been arrested a few months ago for physically attacking his mother.
I said to her, I said, please tell me the truth. I said, did he do that to you? No, I fell. I said, please tell me the truth. She would never admit it to me.
Oh.
But apparently she admitted it to Peggy, that he pushed her and she did fall.
He was said to have violently pushed her so hard that she ended up with a broken arm and a concussion.
Not too long ago, you guys got into a little domestic. The cops were called.
Domestic? Oh, no. My mom and I sorted that out. That was completely gotten out of hand, and then my mom overreacted, I overreacted, and we talked about it after it happened and after I was out of the house.
Carlos said that he was only defending himself, and he went on to reveal that his mother would usually get violent with him as well.
She used to hit me pretty hard, sometimes in the face, mostly in the back, with just anything she could grab.
He said it was a result of this abuse that he left the house to go stay at a family friend's place for some time.
The reason why you moved out? Yeah. After I defended myself, I kind of had enough of it.
While he was away, Carlos went to see a doctor who placed him on antidepressants.
What did the doctor say that he was? I know, depression.
It was only after he started taking the antidepressant medication that his mother allowed him to return home, and according to him, she was extremely happy to have him back. However, it didn't seem like things were the same between them again, because prior to his return, Denise had installed CCTV cameras at strategic points around their home. And this means one thing: Denise was afraid of something or someone, but who or what could that be? Meanwhile, the interrogation toughens.
Rarely ever happens.
Okay.
That rarely ever happens, and what I'm trying to lead to is that 99.9% of the time, it's a family member or a close friend or
you don't know anybody
or a lover or something like that.
And Carlos starts to break.
I don't know, but I will say this. I hope you're not insinuating I would do this. Because that she adopted me from 4. She has been my mother, has been by my side.
He becomes unsettled as he noticed that investigators were now questioning him like a suspect in the murder case.
So I don't know what you guys are trying to get out of me right now, but I didn't do anything and would never do anything to my mother like that.
Now, that's the anger and raw emotions one would expect to see right from the beginning of the interrogation, but it took a direct accusation to trigger those emotions in him. Interestingly, one of the interrogating officers happened to be in charge of the major crime unit during the time Carlos was brought in for physically attacking his mother, and he remembered Carlos having sociopathic traits.
And I remember that CPT talking about how your attitude of things were very sociopathic.
Sociopathic because even a 3-year-old could see that Carlos is trying so hard to act as though he's upset about his mother's death now because the officers had made a direct accusation at him. Nevertheless, the officers didn't have enough evidence to prove that he actually did it, so they let him go for now while they continued with the investigation. However, before Carlos left the police custody, he tried to remove the investigators' attention from himself by providing them with some information that would point them in another direction. This information would then lead to a new twist in the case. Aside from Carlos, Denise had adopted another child, Angel, from Honduras, to give Carlos a brother. But Angel was not the brother Carlos nor Denise hoped for. He was troubled and ran away from home very often. In 2016, Carlos had called 911 after Angel attempted to run away again, and when the officers arrived, they found a distressed Angel with his body covered in bruises and scratches. His room's windows were barred and covered with nails, but the responding officers managed to get in to find that the room was so tiny and deplorable that even a dog would not live in it. The room was airtight, with a flat, dirty mattress at one end and a bucket for defecating and urinating at another end. Angel told the officers that Denise abused him physically and verbally. She would get violent with him and treat him in an inhumane way. Denise was put under arrest for abuse, but Carlos defended her. He said Angel was lying and that he was the violent one. He claimed that Denise locked him up in the room to stop him from running away or hurting them. According to Carlos, Angel had run away 3 years earlier by crawling out of his window. So Denise had barred up his windows and bolted the door as a way of preventing him from running away again. During this time, Carlos was only 13 years old, but he showed so much love and support to his mother as he tried to bail her out of jail. Denise spent about 2 weeks in jail, but was later released on house arrest after her attorney presented a journal she had used to keep track of Angel's violent behaviors. Denise has journaled that she spends most of her nights at Angel's door to prevent him from running away, and that the bucket in his room was just there for emergencies, since there was no toilet in his room. So he could use the bucket anytime he felt too tired to make the journey to the toilet. Even one of Denise's friends testified that Carlos and Denise lived in constant fear for their lives because they thought Angel was mentally unstable and that he would one day harm them in their sleep. Meanwhile, after Denise's arrest, Angel and Carlos were placed under foster care, but Angel ran away from there after a few days. Denise got Carlos back 5 months after she was released from jail, and at that point she gave up on Angel and never talked about him again. However, she already lost her teaching job as a result of the minor abuse charges. But as soon as she returned from jail, she started working with children with autism, taking care of her dogs, and spending more time at home, while Carlos spent most of his time with his girlfriend, Kayla. By now, investigators are already asking questions about Angel and his whereabouts. But with Denise dead and Carlos already a suspect in her murder case, the only people left to provide some helpful information and leads on this case are Denise and Carlos's friends and neighbors. So the detectives went knocking on their doors, but as they started interacting with them, they became aware that the entire neighborhood had been witnessing strange activities since Denise and Carlos moved there.
Weird things have been happening in my neighborhood since Denise and Carlos moved in, which was about the same time they were adopting Angel. My cat got literally cut in half and laid on my lawn. When he was watching my chickens while we were on vacation, we came home and there was a chicken on our front door with the claw of a hammer in its body, dead.
When she said weird things, she meant really weird things. Animals started going missing daily, and unfamiliar cars started pulling into the neighborhood. These were all linked to Carlos because, according to them, he was selling drugs in the area. Now, while Angel might have been considered the black sheep of the family and labeled as troubled, Carlos had even more demons. He had a history of drug and alcohol abuse since he was 11 years old, and he had experimented with various substances such as coke, narco, ecstasy, methamphetamine, and prescription pills. In January 2019, he was also expelled from a Christian school for possession of illegal substances, but he hid it from his mother until May 2019. You can imagine how furious Denise was when she learned about his expulsion from school, and that was the moment he lost his status as the consolation child, since Angel has always been known as the rebel. From that point forward, their neighbors attested that Carlos and his mother had dirty fights from time to time. Their fights were largely about alcohol, partying, drugs, sneaking different girls into the house, turning their house into a nightclub whenever Denise was away, and several other dirty things Carlos was involved in at the time. He rebelled against his mother's move to keep him in check because he saw it as controlling, and he didn't want anybody telling him what and what not to do. Things got to their peak in May 2019 when Carlos wrecked their pickup truck while attempting to take his own life. It was at this point that Denise gave up on him because she just didn't know what to do with him anymore, and Carlos eventually moved out of the house house to stay with Stephanie and Damian Irving, a couple that he was friends with. His girlfriend Kyla said that was the happiest she has seen him because, according to her, the couple were more lenient. However, as the couple would soon discover, Carlos had an underlying health condition that might have contributed to his violent behaviors.
So when he lived with us the first time, he had just overdosed, tried to commit suicide again. So he was in the hospital, and when he was discharged on medicine for bipolar disorder.
During the time Carlos stayed with this couple, Denise came over to the Irvings several times to have a conversation with Carlos, but it always ended very badly.
Shut up! Why is he paying for breaks? Shut up and I'll answer. Shut up! You break your What did I tell you today?
I don't know, you said pay the phone bill, and then you're gonna charge.
Why does he have to pay a phone bill? Because he's a child.
By how aggressive Denise was on that recording, you could tell that she had her own demons too.
Hey, you barged into their house. They've seen you talk, and now Stephanie's seeing how you talk to me.
No, I don't care.
She obviously had a great problem with parenting. Her aggression and violent attitude towards Carlos might have pushed him to become the beast. Now, this is not to make any excuses for him for what he did, but there are people who have been through worse, but still maintained their sanity. However, this entire situation would have been completely avoided if Denise had paid closer attention as a mother instead of being overly aggressive.
Like, Denise was bashing Carlos. Do you know that Carlos wrecked a $15,000 truck? And do you know that I said, he didn't wreck a $15,000 truck. He tried to kill himself.
From the look of things, it seems Denise was even more aggressive to the kids than they were to her. She had an uncontrollable emotional and anger issue.
And I said this because he was crying, and he was like, Mom, you kicked me out, you kicked me out. Why would you kick me out when I needed you most? I just tried to kill myself, and you told me I had to leave.
Carlos and Angel's aggressiveness toward her might have been a reaction to how she treated them.
That her son is sobbing, saying, I needed you. You know, I just wanted to die. And she wouldn't even hug him, wouldn't acknowledge the tears. It was really bizarre.
It's worth noting that Denise's aggression towards her kids is a sign of antisocial personality disorder, APD. Most parents who are physically and/or emotionally abusive toward their own children are usually patients of APD. Individuals with this disorder are known to have poor anger management issues, and this is what we see in the relationship between Denise and her children. Nevertheless, after staying at the Irvings for a couple of weeks, on June 12th, Carlos moved back in with his mother. According to their friends, Denise lived in constant fear for her life from that point on, because they continued to have loud and fierce fights from time to time. Stephanie recalled at one point that Denise had asked her to make sure her dogs are well fed in the event that anything happens to her. So when Denise passed on the way she did, her friends and neighbors had their suspicions that Carlos could have done it. I mean, who wouldn't think that, considering the troubled and chaotic relationship they had?
I sure don't want to say he did, but at the same time, I knew when Denise broke her arm earlier, that was weird. But if he could have done that to her...
More so, Denise's friends suspected Carlos of her murder for another reason, and that was his emotional detachment from the whole situation.
I've talked to Ron, my husband, and said he did not seem sad. He was upset, but I didn't hear the sadness, and I was surprised at that.
He seemed rather happy with the old woman's death because he had an eye on some of the things she owned.
And kept saying, that his mom has a few acres in a couple other states. I don't know if that's true or not. But he said when he turns 18, he was probably going to move to one of them in North Carolina.
He obviously couldn't wait to get his hands on them.
He's like, yeah, man, it sucks what happened, but, I can't wait to get that as far as, the land and the cars and all that stuff. And they also had, no remorse.
However, while they suspected Carlos, they also had reservations about Angel because they believed he too was troubled and violent. So they had also thought that Angel would probably be the one to swing the axe. Considering the circumstances of his exit from the family, I mean, aside from Carlos, he was the next person anyone could think of who would want to hurt Denise, probably out of anger or resentment toward her. Their testimonies further strengthened the investigators' suspicion that Angel must must have probably done it, since they had already interrogated Carlos and found no strong evidence on him, aside from a few things that weren't adding up. But they needed to find Angel, and it was in their search for him that they made a shocking discovery that would lead to another twist in the case. 15-year-old Angel was allegedly involved in an armed robbery case and was believed to be in jail during the time of the murder. With this revelation, Angel was immediately cleared of any suspicion or involvement in Denise's murder, and this left investigators with only one suspect, Carlos. But they would not bring him in yet until they had enough evidence against him. So they started looking at his cell phone data, which showed that Carlos was actively using his phone during the time he claimed he was sleeping that afternoon. He was actively awake the entire time, pressing his phone. They also found that Carlos was not anywhere near Denise's room when he made that frantic 911 call as he had claimed. His phone's GPS pinned his location at the nearby lake area during the time of the call. At this point, investigators knew that they were very close to solving this case, but they needed to look closer. So they quickly assembled a search and dive team to search the entire lake, and you would not believe what they found. The dive team was able to recover all the CCTV cameras Denise had installed in her home, and they were also able to retrieve Denise's cell phone. These 4 devices were immediately sent for digital forensic analysis in hopes that more evidence would be recovered from them. However, no evidence was found on the security cameras, but Denise's cell phone returned some shocking information that helped determine the timeline of the murder. Denise's phone actively showed that her phone was connected to a charger between 3:12 p.m. and 3:45 p.m., but her phone went dead at about 6:18 p.m., which was suspected to be the moment it had been thrown into the lake, and it was also around this time that Carlos made the frantic 911 call. He probably was on the phone with one hand while flinging the evidence into the lake with his other hand. Armed with the evidence and information, the detectives were already 10 steps ahead of Carlos this time, and they didn't waste any time to bring him in. As the detectives presented the evidence before him, Carlos immediately lost his composure and became anxious.
Your mom's down by the lake. Her camera's down by the lake. You see how this is stacking?
I understand.
But even at the sight of the incriminating evidence, Carlos still maintained that he didn't do it.
It was a perfectly good day. We were fine. I don't remember anything bad going on that day.
But when the detectives confronted him with the data retrieved from his cell phone, which showed that he was at the lake area when he made the 911 call.
So it tracks everywhere you went. It says you were down by the lake area.
And that he lied about being asleep during the time of the murder when he was, in fact, awake and actively on his phone the entire time.
But your phone doesn't really show you too far.
It was only then that Carlos decided to tell the truth.
I remember sharpening the house. And then
now it's been established that he did it, but why?
She's very verbally.
Even at this point, Carlos was still emotionally flat and seemed totally disconnected from the gravity of what he had done. So much so that after confessing to brutally murdering his own mother in such a gruesome manner, Carlos expressed his concern about having a criminal record and asked if his record could be expunged.
I just hope that this doesn't really affect too much of stuff. Yeah. College.
Now that's a rare combination of sociopathy and stupidity. However, 9 weeks after his mother's gruesome murder, Carlos Hallowell was charged and convicted of premeditated first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility for parole. But because he was 17 at the time he committed the crime, his sentence will be eligible for review by 2044. Thank you for watching, guys. Please drop your thoughts on this case in the comments below, and if you have enjoyed this video, please do well to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Until next time, stay safe.